Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Tactical Breakdown Report series, a show in which we look at the players that are spending time on loan away from the club and the Arsenal youth team, of course. And we'll have a show specifically focused on the Arsenal youth team coming out tomorrow evening. But for tonight's show, as always, I'm joined by Ben from the Marseille View to talk about William Saliba. How you doing, mate? Are you well?
Very well, yeah. Wish that Arsenal and Marseille were having better results at the minute, but
how things change so quickly in this world and this sport that we so love so much for so many reasons, and then question why we do. It was nice to see you, of course, last month as well. We met for the first time. We watched, unfortunately, the Liverpool game together in a pub in North London. I think it was East London, really. Shoreditch in East London. It wasn't the best, was it? Because you are an Arsenal fan of the English side of things as well.
Yeah. I mean, I watch the games, mate. It's hard, and I think I've been unlucky in the sense that so often these last few seasons, Marseille and Arsenal have been performing similarly. So it's neither of them have been particularly good or particularly bad. So at least it's constant.
It's very true. Yeah, at least it's a consistent, which is one thing that Arsenal haven't been this season. But less about Arsenal and more about Willy Saliba, because he's had an interesting November and start to December too, of course. He played a number of games. He lost one, obviously, big match recently against Stade Brest and in the Europa League against Galatasaray. But the start of November drew 0-0 against Metz. Then there was the chaos of the Lyon game, which we'll go into a bit of detail about in a second. 1-0 win over Troyes and a 1-0 win over Nantes, but obviously in the Europa League that lost to Galatasaray, but a draw against Lazio as well, which obviously left Marseille in not the best of places going into the final game. I mean, I haven't checked the table. Is it over the drew?
It's Conference League for us. Yeah, we're out of the Europa League. So if we avoid defeat against Moscow at home tomorrow, hope we do, we go in Conference League, but into a playoff.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, if we take Saliba, but if I take all of our players, our European record's been terrible for the last few years. I think we've got 2 wins in the last 20 games. We've got a young team. You want them to play as many games together as possible and get that experience under their belt. I'm thinking notably for the ones that the new signings, that are permanent signings, but especially for Saliba, you guys would want him, and we would want him to play as many games as possible. Maybe blood some youngsters if we play some random Georgian or Azerbaijani opposition. You never know who you're going to face in that country. I think Marseille is synonymous with the European Cup, and I think many fans just want us to play the Cup. We just want to be in Europe, and it would be quite a sweet irony that we get ripped for crashing out the Europa League, but imagine if come March we're the only French team left in Europe. That'd be quite funny.
Now, the Galatasaray game in particular was obviously, there was a lot of focus on Saliba. We will go into some of the instances that he played, and we'll look at some of his statistics, listeners, in just a second. But the Galatasaray game, there was a big mistake where he lost the ball dribbling out from defence, which is what he does characteristically, and obviously that led to the goal. What did you make, of course, of that moment, and of course then following on from that, how's he reacted from that big error?
I mean, if you look in that run of 5-6 games, we've got 4 clean sheets or 3 clean sheets. So I think it's as we've been doing the show now we've got a few games under our belt to compare to. It works in the French league because many times Marseille will play at home on a big pitch and teams will sit back, so he won't necessarily be under pressure. Especially Saliba, as we've seen, he carries the ball forward a lot. He's a bit of a playmaker from the back. He plays that role for us. It's going to be different, if you face European level opposition away from home in Turkey, it's hostile. They're going to be, they needed to win to seal qualifications, so they were up for it. We were missing Payet and Rongier, who have been 2 of our most consistent performers and really changed games for us in midfield. So we were expecting a tough time, but you probably not from Saliba, because he's been such a stalwart that I think he was due a mistake. He was due to have a bad game. He's a young player. He's been so solid, so good that you're not going to throw the book at him for having one bad game. But he was just out of sorts. The whole team was out of sorts that night, but he got exposed. And interestingly, I think I don't think you'd expect this, but Galatasaray actually targeted his side quite a bit, notably in the second half. So, yeah, we got overrun and he was left exposed, made the mistake that led to the first goal, and then I think he was to blame for another of the goals as well for poor marking on Ryan Babel of all people.
Classic.
But yeah, apart from that, in the other games in the league, it's been pretty consistent. He's been true to his form. I think I've certainly noticed he's getting forward less, and maybe that'll be reflected in the stats. But yeah, I think he's just maintaining his form. He's a consistent performer for us, and long may it continue yet again. But again, we're a bit like Arsenal, where you feel like you're making one step forward and then 2 steps back, because we lost at the weekend after our performance levels have improved in the last couple of games, and then you lose at home to a team that had 2 shots in the game and scored both. So, yeah.
Very Arsenal. Very, very Arsenal. It's interesting you said there, like, when you close out in the back, that's kind of, it works in the French league. And I don't want that sentence to be misconstrued, because obviously...
No.
I hate it when people describe it as a farmer league, is often the awful tag that sometimes it's given. Now, whilst it's not of the quality level of the Premier League, but the Premier League, is the Premier League is an amalgamation of the best talents from everywhere, much of that coming from France, which, if any case, defends the French league in most cases.
And the best managers too, yeah.
Of course. So when you say about it's fine in the French league, it's going to be important for Arsenal fans to understand, if he tries that then in the Premier League, is he going to get found out?
Yeah, I think, I guess, to elaborate on what I meant is, when you're playing in the league, you have a rhythm, you have a consistency of performance. You know that the opponents, you know the style of play of the Premier League or the French league. You're just used to it. It's your routine. You're adapted to the way you play. You know that you probably won't get pressed, especially if you're a team like Marseille, that we like to have a lot of the possession. Arsenal are the same. Don't do much with it, sadly, but you'd like to have the ball, and you're in sort of a frame of mind and in a system where consistently you know that your role is to carry the ball forward, and you know that you'll be able to manage it, because you know that you're used to the pace of the league. You're used to very few teams pressing you high. So yeah, I think that's what I meant really, is that in Europe it's a different game. European competition football, different style of plays, and on different continent, in different countries that play differently in the league too. All it takes is for you to either have an off night, which you did, or to come up against a decent opposition that is stronger than stronger than the likes you would face in the league. Imagine if Arsenal play Burnley. It's going to be very different than when Arsenal play a Lazio or a Dortmund in Europe.
I think when we talk about the last month, besides the obvious mistake that happened in the Galatasaray game, the big talking point was the Lyon match. For those that weren't aware or didn't see what happened, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, but fairly early on in the game, I think it was, Dimitri Payet was struck by, was it a coin or a bottle that was?
No, it was a full bottle of plastic bottle full of water after barely 4 minutes played when taking a corner.
And obviously the game was postponed. The players left the field, they didn't return. And for those that don't know, this isn't the first time that Payet has been targeted either. This also happens during a game with Saliba's former loan side Nice as well. Is it Payet specifically? Because it's happened to him twice now. Is it him that's being targeted, or is it just a Marseille against the world's kind of vibe?
I think Payet's just been on the receiving end, because he takes the set pieces, and I think at the very least in the French league, it's been happening for years. Not to this extent, but people throw paper, people throw coins, lighters, phones. Sometimes install bloody nets. It's not that difficult, especially if it's a high risk game like that, and it's going through the committee now to decide what the sanctions will be for Lyon. And we're all expecting to get screwed somehow and have to replay the game and all of that. And they're basing a lot of their defence on Payet exaggerated injury and didn't want to get examined by a doctor and blew it out of proportion. It's just a horrible line of defence. So it's not specifically Payet. I think it happens to Neymar too. It happens to every player when they go to a hostile ground where there are hostile fans. Sadly, that's how it happens in Europe. It's not, it used to happen in England, and then they cleaned it up. They cleaned up the stands. They gave people bans, and now it's a bit more friendly, even though you do see incidents.
Unfortunately, I think over my lifetime, it's getting worse in grounds, especially England, and especially with racism, and in particular, it's awful. I feel like it's getting worse.
I think I remember someone was comparing it to, a lot of people on social media, as we know how toxic it can be. They're like, Payet, I got hit by a bottle once, didn't need to fall over. And they compare it to when a Birmingham City fan ran on the pitch and assaulted Grealish. Like, what was that, a couple of years ago? He whacked him around the head.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a goalkeeper as well a few years back that got attacked when he was like waiting to take a goal kick. I think it was in the lower divisions as well. So I mean, look, not enough is done. Clearly, I mean, I think I saw it was. I think it was Leicester that were in the Europa League the other day, and there was like was it Legia Warsaw? Was it Legia? I think they were playing. I can't remember. I think it was, but the stewards, police struggling to contain the crowds. It is obviously a big show. You got hundreds of people, thousands of people trying to get between. Something that does need to be done, and the conversations continue around safe standing. And you're like, how can we have a safe standing conversation when we've not actually sorted out people being able to sit sensibly during games? Anyway, we're going off on a slight tangent. Saliba, through that experience, do you think there's anything that he will probably take from that? Anything that he will be able to learn and grow from that? That not just that against Lyon, but also against Nice as well. And do you think that's going to develop in kind of that mental way?
It throws you off, I think, especially when it's only been 4 minutes. I mean, in Nice, we'd played already, I think, 75 minutes of the game. And I think, especially for us, who as a team that needs to play games and build up the rhythm, and especially because it was the first game back after the international break, I do think that probably contributed to the performance we saw in Galatasaray, where they'd had too much rest and not rest, but they'd had too much 3 weeks without playing together in a competitive game, and that leads to a horror show in Europe on the first day. So, if anything, it's mentally it will have its impact. I don't think I think yes, the players are probably shook up and stuff when it happens, and then you don't laugh about it, but you just get on with it. You're professional. You've got to get to training the next day and crack on. And certainly, apart from the Galatasaray game, he's been his usual self, which is consistent, solid. And he's kept 3 clean sheets in the last six games he's played.
Yeah, I think it's defensively, and we're going to look at some of the stats in a minute. That's certainly part of his game that he's trying to develop whilst on loan, and we know that he's flamboyant, he's exuberant, he's expressive as a centre back, but those raw basic defensive skills are always going to be the ones that come into question. Speaking of which, let's have a look at the statistics from last season.
It's just worth bearing in mind, Tom, that I saw the other day, Saliba's been our most used player. So he's played the most games out of any Marseille player. So he is getting minutes. He's started almost every game. So, yeah.
These are the stats that are taken in comparison from our last show, which was obviously covering the month of October. You can see a number of arrows there pointing towards whether or not they went up or down, relevant to what statistic we're looking at. Sometimes there's 2 because there's 2 stats for each of the individual metrics. So for Jules, he's improved defensively in this area, going up to 4.59 joules per 90 and a 68.7% win rate in those joules, which is really good. Like when you want to see him kind of breaking into those 70%, but even at 68, you'll see centre backs across plenty of leagues struggling to reach those heights. So that's definitely showing that evidence of improvement, isn't it?
I think the joules as well, the important metric when you look at the joules, and if anybody watches Marseille, because we're based on around control. So we have the possession, we play a high block. It's quite sterile, sadly, but many of those joules will be him chasing someone down and putting in a last-ditch challenge to stop him getting through on goal. It will be winning a header from when a counter-attack starts. So he has to position himself well to anticipate when there's going to be a free ball, if someone in midfield loses the ball. So it's not your sort of typical Sunday league centre-back joules where he's going up for headers and he's pushing people over. It is proper having to think on his feet and anticipate counterattacks and stuff. So it's really good for his development.
The aerial duels, he's improved in the number of aerial duels that he's getting involved in, 2.41. It has gone down ever so slightly. It was only in the lower 50s anyway, I think, when we looked at it last time. But 50% of those aerial duels won. Slightly less interceptions being made, but he is making less losses. It's gone down to 5.33. But less of those are being made in his own half. More of those are happening in his own half compared to last month. And I think that's probably comes down to when you look at the Galatasaray mistake, that definitely feeds into those statistics and why that's dropped. Recoveries, though, slightly less recoveries, but more of them are happening in the opposition half. And he's kind of, when he is defending, he's actually, I think it's only marginal. It's only gone from around 17% to 19.3, but he is improving in how he wins the ball back slightly further up the pitch. And that's certainly something for a team like Arsenal when they want to retrieve possession as soon as possible. That's going to be a characteristic that they're going to really benefit from.
Yeah, and it's, to win when you're a centre-back playing in a 3-man defence, to win almost 20% of
1 in 5 year recoveries,
in the opposition's half, it's pretty damn exceptional, let's be honest, especially for a young player that he's exposed because he's on the right side of a 3-man defence. If the ball goes over him or behind him, or if he loses it and doesn't recover it, his direct opponent's through on goal. So, he's just been so good for us, so consistent that even if he does lose the ball and he makes mistakes, we're not going to slate him because it's not like he's making a mistake a game that's costing us a goal. He has been our most consistent performer. He's solid at the back, and any mistake he makes is very rare. And as you can see from the stats, he quite often recovers the ball when he loses it.
Looking at the passing statistics, now we always have to caveat these because Saliba started off the season absolutely ridiculously with his passes. If you go back and watch the first report that we did from, I think it was August, there were so many 100% in this. So unfortunately, what is going to happen is you're going to see that month on month, these are probably going to end up going down. Although saying that, he is in the 80% now with the pass into the final third and the pass into the box. So hopefully we will start seeing those again start going up. But again, 94.5% passing accuracy is really good. 8.06 passes into the final third is still really, really good. And seeing that averaged across those 20 games is also strong. 58, nearly 60% of those long passes still reaching their target. And despite it not being as high as it was, 0.4 passes into the box still shows he's a centre-back that likes to be a little bit more adventurous with his passes.
Yeah, he has been less adventurous, but I think that's just the nature of because you can't have it both ways, can you? You can't have that many clean sheets and have your centre backs running and playing balls into the box. You've got to have a balance. But I think it's the numbers are still incredible for a centre back, especially a young one playing for a side, playing in European games too. Can't complain at all. And I think especially when the thing that's to bear in mind is we like Arsenal, we play out from the back. Very rarely does the goalkeeper kick the ball away, a goal kick or anything. So he's one of the players that receives the ball the most from the goalkeeper, and so he's either already got someone pressing him, or he's got time to pick a pass. And quite often he plays forward. He doesn't really do many lateral passes. He always looks to play the forward pass.
There you go. Lastly, then, looking at kind of the style side of his game, slightly less success of his dribbling, although 66.7% for a centre-back in terms of dribbling.
That's the Galatasaray game alone.
Exactly. Yes, and that certainly did drop it. But progressive runs have gone up 1.48, and the number of touches he's making in the box across those games is gone up. I mean, last time, and something we kind of comically discussed is how close he's getting to scoring. I mean, has he got any closer this month to getting a goal?
Not much, no. So the same. I think he against Nantes he got a header, but it was off target. If you put into context, like Gabriel's goal away to Leicester, if Saliba can include that into his game with his physique, he's going to win loads of aerial duels in the box as well. Having said that, I think you have to contextualise. I think we've got 1 goal scored from our last 83 corners, so we're very poor at set pieces generally, sadly. So it's not much to do with him. It's to do with many times the delivery that's poor from Payet. that if he doesn't have his shooting boot, his passing boots on for a corner, or it's other players missing headers too. It's not just Saliba.
Let's then move on to the final part of the show, which is to get a couple of your questions from the chat box. And I know a few of you were throwing some in the chat. So if you've got a few questions specifically around the topic of Saliba, do continue to throw them in. We'll be around for a few more minutes. Vinny says, Ben, do you think him being on loan is benefiting him? Making the mistakes at your team, will he get slated, or are the fans more
Marseille is very passionate. So, I think every team, Arsenal's the same. You can be a hero and you can be praising him 3 games. He makes one mistake, he gets death threats on social media. It's the reality of we build these players up so much. I think we've got that issue currently with Boubacar Kamara, who's one of our own. He's from the academy. He's been pretty awful in the last couple of months, and suddenly the veil's starting to fall, and he's sort of holding the club hostage over his contract as well that expires in June. So he's not doesn't look like he's going to extend, and it's awful when a kid that's come through your academy leaves on a free and screws you. But I think there are many other scapegoats than Saliba, and Saliba's he's just been so good that even if he did have a bad game, the next game he's back to his usual self. He's the boss in defence, winning the duels, and carrying the team, and the clean sheet, the number of clean sheets. I think we've got one of the highest ratios of clean sheets. We've got the best defence in the French league. We've only, is it 13 goals conceded, I think? And I think 13 or 14. And
then 14 goals conceded, which is joint with Ren, and that's it. Yeah, yourself and Ren.
In the number of clean sheets, I think we had the most before last weekend's game, but we're up there. So I think we've kept 10 clean sheets or something out of 20 games. It's pretty damn good, and Saliba's a big part of that. So obviously a huge benefit for him being on loan, and huge benefits that I think we've discussed this before. We're playing 3 at the back, but the way he's being asked to play by Sampaoli, which is carry the ball, be part of the attack, be one of the playmakers, be a distributor. You would think it ties in perfectly with what Arteta wants to put in place at Arsenal, and what you see when it's going well at Arsenal, which is Ben White picking some dimes from the back, and Saliba's proving he can do that.
Gary Griffin says, do you think he would cope with the Premier League's teams? They're exceptionally good on the counter and, of course, at pressing. Does he have the skill and speed to not get caught on the ball? Which I know after watching the Galatasaray game is probably the best example. But do you think that's something that he will kind of develop out of his game, I suppose?
It doesn't happen often. He doesn't get caught often. Even against Paris Saint-Germain last month, everybody was worried Mbappe's going to run riot in this defence and stuff because we play a high line. But no, they weren't particularly pressing either. But he, I think he's got the athletic qualities to not get caught out. And then, like everything, that's why it's a weird situation that he's in, because you'd have thought he's been at Arsenal 3 years. You'd have thought he'd been blooded at least 10 games in the Premier League to get used to it, or the Cup, make the mistakes, then ship him out on loan so he gets consistent minutes. I think there will be a period of adaptation. There always is. Any player that comes to the Prem from abroad, it's super rare that they get it right within 6 months. But I certainly think that he will, with given time, he should be at least as good as Gabriel's developed.
Yeah, I think there was a point earlier on actually talking about Gabriel. Gary it was that said, I feel Saliba is about the level of Gabriel when we bought him from Lille. I think he will need a year or so to get to Gabriel's stats. So, yeah, I mean, there you go. PAPP says, do you think that Saliba and Guendouzi would stay at Marseille? I mean, Guendouzi is pretty much 99% guaranteed to, based upon...
It is, yes. So our chairman came out, was it yesterday, and basically confirms that the deal becomes permanent if we avoid relegation. So
right,
that's the way it's negotiated. And look, Saliba, we'd love to keep him. There were rumours a few weeks ago about us apparently negotiating with Arsenal to make the move permanent, but I just don't see us having the finances to do that. No. Sadly, unless he really pushed for the move, and and he really insisted it's Marseille or no one else. And the reality is, yes, we'd love to keep him, but if he performs like this, Arsenal will be stupid not to keep him and play him. And there will be bigger clubs than Marseille interested in him, I'll be sure, if he is open to a move.
Yeah, it would make a lot of sense. I mean, PSG, I always kind of link towards with their aging centre backs at the moment, and they've got Kimpembe, of course. But you think to Marquinhos,
Kipembe's a cheap version of Saliba, mate.
Sure, wow, there you go. I mean, you got obviously Ramos is there. We know his age. We know Marquinhos is getting on, so that kind of does fit if they were to go for someone. But
just seen one of the questions there: would Marseille's manager be good for Arsenal? No, guys. He's we're starting to lose patience. Yeah, we're starting to lose patience with him because he just changes the lineup too often, just chopping and changing. Apart from the usual stalwarts, and they get knackered. But we've got something like 6-7 draws. We drew 4 of our 5 Europa League games. It's just very frustrating because he plays a weird system, which is like a 3-4-3, and it looks like he's trying to reinvent football, and it's just not working. So we're all tearing our hair out, going, you know, when the hell are you going to revert to a classic tactic that players will understand? They won't be as confused and they won't be as knackered. So I'd advise. I'd hate for Arsenal to get him because I'm suffering with him at Marseille. And I don't want to suffer with him at Arsenal again if he does go there. So
there you go. Just a couple of quick fire ones before we wrap up. African Theory TV says, who would he make a better partner for, White or Gabriel?
That's a tough one. Because
it's interesting because I remember speaking to Jeremy Smith about this, and he thought that Arsenal spending £50 million on Ben White didn't make too much sense when they had a player as good as Saliba already at the club. Do you think that Saliba's been better than White this season? Because I know, obviously, an Arsenal fan, you've seen plenty of both.
Yeah, so. Yes, he has. But again, you've got to put into context that he's playing in Ligue 1, not the Premier League. And Arsenal have played, you know, many of the top teams already this season.
Chelsea, City, Liverpool. Yeah.
So
yeah. Everton, of course, the mighty Everton. Yeah.
But it's a hard question to answer because he's a bit of both. So he's got White's quality with the ball in his feet, but he's got Gabriel's athletic qualities. So I think he would work with both. I think it would be a case
that nicely leads into the question of, is he more equally compatible in a back 4 or back 3? Could he then work, as you say, similar to both? Could he work in a back 3 in the middle of a 3 with White on the right and Gabriel on the left?
I think he's proving that. Would he? It depends what the style of play would be. Would it be as aggressive as it is with Marseille, where he's being asked to contribute and push forward a lot? Maybe not. I think in a classic 5-3-2, he would be very well suited because he could push forward, but it wouldn't leave the defense as exposed because it's a system that makes sense and there's cover behind him or on the sides, and he wouldn't have to make as many of those overlapping runs that he tends to be doing. So I think he could play in both. At Nice last year, he was in a back 4. He did well.
Yeah.
And he's proving that he can play in the back 3 at Marseille in a very weird, strange system at times. That
the French youth side play with the back 4. Does he play? The French youth under 21s. Do they play over back 4?
I think they're playing back 4, but recently the senior team has been playing with back 5. No, back 3. 3-4-3-2, but with better players than Marseille, so it works. Additional's a bit more cautious too, but
of course.
All the signs are pointing that he's playing in the right system for whether it's his future at Arsenal if they change tactic or if the national team stay at 3 at the back. It could be a way in for him because he knows that system now.
There you go, Ben. Thank you so much as always, mate, for your time. Really appreciate it. Tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, happy. Guys, just if you want more information, we debrief the games on the Marseille View podcast. And that's the best way, really. If you've got any questions, reach out. I'm more than happy to be here. Be happier if both the teams were performing better and winning. Hopefully, the next time we do one of these, it will be the case. Always a pleasure, guys.
Absolutely. You can find the Marseille View on Twitter at Marseille View. You can follow Ben on Twitter as well at 91Immortal. So make sure you give both.
Gaming tag.
Yeah, I mean, I was always the same when I was young. There you go. Yeah. So make sure you give him a follow and send him some nice messages and say thanks for coming on the show. Because Ben, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. It was a pleasure to share a beer with you the other week. And I will see you next month for the next updates on Saliba, which hopefully both teams, as you say, are performing much better. But we will wait and see. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, do drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. We do these shows for also the Arsenal youth sides, and we'll be covering them tomorrow with Kev, aka Next Generation Arsenal. You can follow Met Scouting Indoors on Twitter as well. I'm sure many of you already do. So make sure you join us tomorrow evening around a similar time for that as well. See you tomorrow morning for the 8 a.m. show, and as always, up the Arsenal.